Have you got a magical name or a witch's name yet? Do you even know what a witch's name is? Hi, I'm Sandra from MysteryWitchSchool.com. If you're new to the channel and you want to know more about Wicca and witchcraft, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss any videos. In this video, we're talking about witches' names, your magical name, the name that you either take yourself when you become initiated into the craft, or you self-initiate into the craft, or a name that's even given to you in some circumstances, depending on what type of group you may be involved in and depending on the tradition. But why take a new name? Why have a new name? Naming ourselves different names or being named other names when we enter a spiritual path or a mystical path is common throughout the world, and it's common throughout religious and magical and mystical traditions. A lot of the mystical schools will have you take a new name when you initiate into those schools, and this is across culture. It's a very, very, very common practice. The name that you're given when you're born is the name that your parents give you. That name is your worldly name. That's the name you're known by as you grow up, and for a lot of people who don't like their name, they'll change it. That name that you change your name to is still pretty much your worldly name. It's the name that people will know you by in the world. A magical name or a mystical name is a name that is to do with your spiritual path. And for those of you who follow a more of a mystical type of brand of Wicca or witchcraft, or who aspire to, will understand that that's actually who we are either aspiring to be, or who we're actually discovering ourselves to be. The mystical path is the way of life. It is what life is about. And the name is a reminder of that. So when you take a witch's name, you're taking a name that is reminding you of your path, and a name that encapsulates who you're aspiring to be, or really who you really are underneath the ego, underneath the persona, who your higher self is. It's an expression of your higher self. And you may go through a few different magical names or witches' names as you move through the path, the craft, your evolution. That will change for a lot of people, because as you evolve and as you become more aware, you will also realize that maybe the name that you started off with is no longer relevant anymore. You've actually moved on further to be more of who you are. Even if you are in a traditional mystical school where you are given a name by a guru or a teacher, sometimes the name that they give you can also change. But the whole point of the name is to remind you of who you are becoming, who you really are, what you're aspiring toward, and that you are walking this sacred path. In a coven environment, people will call each other by their coven names, but the name that you are given in the coven, or that you take in a coven, is generally not used outside of the coven environment. Although I do know some people who have actually legally changed their name to their magical name. But generally speaking, you would only use that name within the coven environment. Some witches, a lot of authors do use their magical names as their name when they're writing books or when they're presenting. A lot of witches will use a magical name instead of their own name when they're doing public work. It's not a problem to do that, because if you're out there and you're working professionally, I guess, as a witch or as a teacher, then you need to be reminded of your path all the time. And being called your magical name is a way of reminding you of the path and what you're doing. If you are teaching, if you're writing, if you're mentoring or doing any of that witch work in the world, then you will also want to be making everything that you do there sacred. So it makes sense to use your magical name in those circumstances. Now, a lot of witches will have two magical names. One that is public, and one that is private, that only they and totally only they will know. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of power in a name. And if you know someone's name, it's very easy then to then do any nasty work towards them knowing their name. But if you don't know their name, their magical name, their sacred name that they've taken, then it's very difficult then to really hone in that magic, because they've actually got a name that nobody knows. So it's worth thinking about taking two names, one that you're quite okay for other members of the craft to know, and one that only you know. And it can be tricky taking a name and deciding what a name is. A lot of people take god and goddess names. That's pretty common in the craft. Other people will take names that are from maybe characters in mythology who weren't deities, but they were heroes and heroines in mythology. Other people use variations on a name that they just really, really like. Some people will match the name to their numerology. So if you know what your numerology is, if you add up your date using numerology and say it comes to the number 8, then you would choose a name that letters will add up to the number 8. That's a very common practice, but it's not totally necessary, but it is a common practice and a lot of people like to do it that way. Otherwise, it's taking a name that just resonates with you. You may go into a meditative state and you may channel the name. There's various different ways that the name can come. And as I said at the beginning, you may even be given that name by a teacher or a guru or somebody who is actually training you, may actually give you a name in some traditions. Although most witchcraft traditions, you tend to take your own name. It's not necessarily given to you like it is in some of the other Eastern mystical traditions. Your name is very special. It is really who you are. And it's important not to get the ego too caught up in names, because the ego will often want to identify with something that's very, very powerful and very bold. And so you may take the name of either a goddess or a god or a character that has a particular characteristics that's really more of an attraction for the ego rather than it actually being who you really are underneath the ego. So it's something to always watch out for when you are choosing anything to do with a magical name. That is this my ego just wanting to take that name because, oh, it feels powerful to have that name? Or is it actually something that really resonates with who I am underneath? Or maybe it's a name that I need at this stage of my evolution to help bring me into that power of that name. And then further down the track, that name may change. So always be aware that the ego is often going to want to take things that actually make you feel good rather than actually necessarily being the right thing for you. And I guess when it comes to some of those other mystical traditions, the Eastern traditions that give you names, that's probably one of the reasons why the teachers actually give the students the name, is so that their students' ego isn't getting caught up with it all. But Wicca, witchcraft, we are more autonomous and we don't have gurus. We have teachers and mentors, but we don't have gurus. It's very much a case of walking this path with your own autonomy and just asking for guidance along the way, so that if you fall into a hole, you have someone there to help you out of it. Or even just to give you some, warnings about, how not to fall into a hole, for example. However, students often learn best when they've actually fall into holes. And I know that that's some of the things I've learned, is when I've dug a hole and fallen into it of my own volition. Not necessarily consciously digging the hole, but digging it anyway, and I've learned from the experience. But it is great to have a mentor and a teacher there to help you, if you do fall into a hole, to help you work out how to get out of the hole. So then further down the track, when you come to do teaching, you'll be able to do the same for somebody else. So that's what's in a name. And if you are interested in working with a teacher in a group environment of like-minded people, do have a look at the Mystery Witch School Academy. It is a 12-month course to help you learn the Wiccan path and to start practicing Wicca rather than just reading about it, getting confused, not feeling confident about practicing, so that you can actually start doing some practices, get your confidence going, start practicing magic, getting connected with yourself and the deities, taking a magical name at the end of it, and really practicing and living your craft. Do have a look at the Mystery Witch School 101. If you like the video, hit the like button, share it with your friends. I'm not speaking very well today. And don't forget to subscribe. I will see you on the next video. Blessed be.